Texting.
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 Texting. Texting. Texting. Texting.
Texting.
Texting.
Mark, Will, and Tomek present
Texting.
Hello, all you dope fiends, and welcome to another episode of Reefer Madness. I'm Mark Will in Taipei.
And I'm Cheech and Chong in San Francisco.
Oh, you're two people today.
I couldn't think of anything wittier. I needed more time.
I sometimes feel like that myself. I am a Gemini after all, so there you go.
Yeah.
Well, as promised, today we look at Gore Vidal's essay on drugs. And this classic essay was published in 1970, and it's still relevant today, 52 years later, I'm sorry to say. The official title of the essay is Drugs, Case for Legalizing Marijuana. And it was an op-ed he published in the New York Times. From the title, you can clearly see what his position is. And I don't want to speak for both of us, but I think it's probably our position too. It certainly is my position. Legalize it, as Peter Tosh says.
And don't criticize it.
That's right.
Doctors smoke it. And my favorite line is, and players of instruments too.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Okay, so Drugs, Case for Legalizing Marijuana, published September 26, 1970, in the New York Times. And the sub-headline or the tagline says, in the long run, it would save lives and end hypocrisy. And before we, get into background on Gore Vidal and so on, I thought we would start with the text. We can even read portions of it. We can, alternate paragraph by paragraph. How about that?
As you like, sir. I will say, I feel like this essay, well, two things. He seems like a strange spokesperson. I mean, maybe that makes him stronger in a sense because he's not really someone who is particularly attached to drugs. He doesn't really use drugs. But I find him like
He says he's tried them all.
Yeah, but liked none, right? So...
Well, maybe not. That's what he says.
Yeah, that's what he says.
I mean, I haven't heard of, any drug issues that he's had, but I always thought of him as more of a drinker, but, not like a lush or an alcoholic, just a social drinker because he was a big party person. He and his partner, hosted a lot of celebs when they visited their home in Italy. But we'll get into that later. Let's just start with this essay, with the first paragraph of this essay, which I encountered for the first time, I think, in a college course. It was like in an anthology it was a textbook, for some kind of comp and rhetoric class. Mm-hmm. Maybe it was one I was teaching at a junior college or something, but or it may have, I think it was earlier than that, like maybe one of my own classes that I was taking. But I remember reading this, let's say it was in the late 80s or early 90s, in the heyday of the war on drugs. I mean, the war on drugs is still going on, so it never really stopped, unfortunately. But I thought, yes, this is... I was shocked at how... I felt like he gave me permission to think these things, and say these things out loud. I was so brainwashed at the time that I'd never heard anyone talk like that. But I remember thinking, yes, exactly, that's right.
It's interesting because, I don't know, I find the essay slightly underwhelming in the sense that it does seem like a rhetoric textbook would be a place you would find it, because it kind of like checks the boxes of maybe different arguments in favor of legalizing marijuana. But overall, like I don't know. It felt kind of lackluster and just kind of academic. Didn't really have much spark to it or poetry, but maybe that's kind of the point.
Okay, well,
you encouraged me to be to be brutal in my takes on stuff, so
absolutely,
I'm coming out swinging. Yeah.
Okay, well, let's hear it. I mean,
maybe I'll warm to it more on when we read it now.
Okay, well, I mean, I just described like my, I guess that's my reason for picking this, because when I first encountered it, and maybe it had to do with the time and the place, right? Like that. Now this is almost a mainstream opinion, although there's been no change, or not much change in the law, at least on the federal level, if we're talking about the states, and other parts of the world as well, apart from say Amsterdam and Portugal, which decriminalized drugs, and other places. But in the states, it's still I think it's still very relevant, unfortunately, sadly.
Agreed.
Yeah.
I guess I'm just saying, like, drugs and weed, for example, are like often associated with so many like artists, musicians, or things that come with a lot of like flavor. And so when it's presented in this way, in this like really academic way, it feels like almost like an outsider coming in to talk about the culture.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Like he's not a pothead himself, so
yeah, he's not doesn't seem like an authority on it, like someone who actually like, yeah, I know what's up, like I'm down. Like
but as you say, that in a way that could make it more persuasive.
Sure.
He's just arguing from a philosophical perspective.
Right,
it's completely ridiculous that this herb, this substance, is criminalized. But it is important to point out the focus is on marijuana in particular. I mean, the essay is drugs, but the subtitle is Case for Legalizing Marijuana in particular. He doesn't he briefly references these other drugs, and that I want to talk about that when we get to it, because there's some questions I have. But let's just jump into it. First paragraph, okay? Here's how he starts. And I remember when I read this for the first time, I thought, this is a very powerful introduction, very effective. Mm-hmm. It is possible to stop most drug addiction in the United States within a very short time. Simply make all drugs available and sell them at cost. Label each drug with a precise description of what effect, good and bad, the drug will have on whoever takes it. This will require heroic honesty. Don't say that marijuana is addictive or dangerous when it is neither, as millions of people know. Unlike speed, which kills most unpleasantly, or heroin, which is addictive and difficult to kick. Any comment on the introductory paragraph?
Yes. Seems like kind of an absurd premise that he's starting with. It is like making drugs available is going to stop most drug addiction. Don't really see how those two correlate. I mean, we have legal drugs and many people are addicted. We have alcoholism. We have people addicted to cigarettes. I don't understand exactly how A gets to B there.
Well, he discusses that later, and he does say most drug addiction. He doesn't say all, so that's a key point. He comes back to that later. But
okay, but I'm not convinced.
He's saying legalizing it is much better than criminalizing it. And you just tell people honestly, which is not the case now, There's still morons that would argue that, marijuana, for instance, is addictive. Or now what they say is it's a gateway drug and it'll lead to, the harder drugs. Right. And he in a way goes along with that distinction. You know, you've got the recreational drugs like marijuana and psychedelics, which many people are on board with, but you know, these harder drugs like speed and heroin, whoa, watch out for that. That's more dangerous. And have you ever heard of Dr. Carl Hart?
No.
Okay, so he's a psychologist and neuroscientist who advocates for the legalization of all drugs, and he himself openly uses heroin recreationally. And he says, I mean, I have no experience.
I know this guy.
Yeah. I have
He was on Rogan.
Sure, and many other shows. He's been on with Brianna Joy Gray, and you know, back in the day when it was worth watching, he was on the Young Turks and so on. But well, he of course advocates for complete legalization, but he says, like, you know, people who criticize those who use heroin and other so-called hard drugs recreationally are, number one, ignorant of the facts, and number two, possibly, I don't know if he specifically said this, but the implication is that, like, there's a kind of racist categorization of these drugs, right? Like he specifically mentions Michael Pollan and says, okay, yeah, most people are on board with Michael Pollan and his advocacy for marijuana and psychedelics, right? Like, those are safe, mind exploring, consciousness expanding drugs for white people, right? But when we talk about using, for example, heroin for recreational purposes, some of those same people say, whoa, hey now, that's going a bit too far. But he argues that you know, a very small percentage of people will become addicted because a very small percentage of people have addictive, I don't know, metabolisms, or they're genetically predisposed to addiction or psychologically predisposed. Basically, it's similar to those who become alcoholics, right? Like, alcohol is a dangerous drug, and yet it's now legal, although at one time in the States it was prohibited, right? But
wait, so he's saying that heroin is not that addictive?
That's what he argues. He says the neuroscience says that a very small percentage of people will become addicts. You know, it's higher than.
I haven't heard that before.
That's what he says. I heard him say this.
Okay,
I heard him say this.
Okay, but what else have you heard in your life? Is my point. I've definitely heard the opposite, and not from people who are particularly like ill-willed towards drugs. And even in this first paragraph you just read, it says heroin, which is addictive.
Well, this is why I wanted to bring it up, because there is a dissenting opinion there.
Fair enough. No,
I mean, he doesn't agree with that. He says that the percentage of people who are predisposed to addiction to heroin is slightly higher than the percentage of people who are predisposed to become alcoholics. Is it possible to become a heroin addict? Of course, just like it's possible to become an alcoholic. But I think his argument is, if you use these substances, whatever they are, heroin or anything else, you know, responsibly, the chances of becoming an addict are, you know, very small.
Yeah, fair enough.
Okay, so, and, you know, of course, he knows that all of these problems are exacerbated by the criminal justice system and the, you know, decisions made by legislators who are not neuroscientists for sure, and, you know, they're motivated by other concerns, like appealing to the moral panic of certain segments of the population, let's say. So I wanted to point out that Gore Vidal seems to go along with that distinction, but not everyone does. That's all I'm saying. I'm not advocating.
No, I'm glad you brought that
to-
up. It's good
for
to hear
people
those
to-
perspectives.
I'm not advocating for people to become strung out on smack.
I mean, I don't even have a strong opinion on it. Like, people can do what they want. I'm just
Exactly,
saying,
exactly.
Chemically, for me, it does. I always assumed it was quite addictive. That's all I'm saying. I'm
Right.
not even anti-heroin.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, that's another conversation. Maybe when we talk about a William S. Burroughs book.
Yeah,
Or-
Junkie's
or
been in
text.
my mind the whole time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you have anything you want to say about that?
No,
Now?
not really. I don't remember it too well. I just remember
Okay.
it's just a strong association with. I mean, I think about that, and I think about like Irvin Welsh,
Right.
Spotting.
Right.
So,
Well,
yeah.
even though I'm a completionist and I love Burroughs, I've become obsessed with Burroughs. I haven't read Junkie and I haven't read Queer, those earlier novels, whereas I've read most of the later stuff. But okay, we'll save that for another time.
Okay.
Let's continue. Next paragraph, I'll let you take that.
All right. For the record, I have tried once almost every drug and liked none, disproving the popular Fu Manchu theory that a single whiff of opium will enslave the mind. Nevertheless, many drugs are bad for certain people to take, and they should be told about them in a sensible way.
Anything to disagree with there? I mean,
you
he's
comment first, because
Well,
when I
he's
read,
our-
I'm so focused on reading loquaciously.
Yeah, well, and you did a good job. Well done. I mean, again, he's advocating for honesty, right? Like, people should be told about all of these drugs in a sensible way. If you take this, here is what you can expect.
Yeah.
Okay? Here are the pros and the cons. I mean, it's hard to dispute that, right? Like, there's got to be knowledge and education about these substances.
What resonates with me in this paragraph is just, the idea that, it is absolutely possible to dabble. I mean, I dabbled quite a bit and never really got addicted to, feel like I had control. I always had control in the sense that, like, I just wanted to try stuff and I managed to just try it, Like, I was never the person that came back the next day and wanted more.
Do you feel comfortable telling us what you tried?
Yeah, no problem. I guess I am. Well, ecstasy, mushrooms, coke, a lot of weed, and I guess just other like pill stuff. And and I kind of unsuccessfully tried peyote. Like, I didn't try enough to really get the fun part of it.
Was this true, like, Arizona peyote? Or
Yeah, I think it was. And like, me and my roommate were like very, very cautious about it. So like, we had it in a liquid form and we're supposed to take like a shot of it, I think. And we just like took a little sip to kind of see what would happen. And then ended up getting like the bad side effects. So kind of like starting to feel just like incoherent and this constant need to pee. So at one point we were both in the backyard, in different parts of the backyard, like with our dicks hanging out, like just like squeezing out little drops, and it was very uncomfortable. And the next day, like I couldn't really read well, but we didn't like hallucinate because we just didn't go any further with it. So
this story sounds familiar.
maybe I told you about it.
Have I heard it before?
Probably,
Okay.
to be honest, yeah. So,
Okay, well, so it was in liquid form, so you didn't actually eat the peyote button.
No,
this was like mescaline, right?
I guess so, yeah.
Yeah. Well, this comes up in that Michael Pollan documentary. I mean, there's a difference between having mescaline, which is the synthesized form, or the active ingredient or the psychoactive ingredient from the peyote button, but that it's different because those indigenous tribes consider that a sacred plant, right? And they most of the people that use it, according to this Michael Pollan documentary, most of these indigenous folk, they're okay with outsiders taking mescaline, but they don't want outsiders poaching on their limited, scarce supply of peyote. You understand?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it sounds like you guys didn't have the actual organic peyote, but it was like the derivative or the synthesized mescaline.
But it was the Tucson desert, so it's got those kind of flavors
right
around that area.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, so it sounds like it wasn't a great trip.
No, but I've had like really amazing trips, like in nature with mushrooms, for example, like an epic hike with a couple of my buddies where it just like, it definitely enhanced the experience. So
right.
I don't know if we can get into drug experiences, like maybe I'll let you moderate that a little bit.
Yeah, well, we want to keep the focus on the essay, I guess, but
right.
That's certainly something I'd like to explore in another episode. What was I going to say? Oh, the mushrooms, that's, even though that also is a psychedelic, that's a different substance, like, again, the Michael Pollan series I keep talking about considers that to be quite distinct, like he focuses on 4 different psychedelic drugs, and he even though he sees the similarities, he's at pains to point out the distinctions to be made.
100%.
Yeah. So, what about opium? Have you ever had a whiff of opium?
No. And you?
Yeah, I did do opium when I was in Laos.
Okay. I feel like I may have heard this story, but it would have been years ago, so... Yeah, feel free to share.
Well, it was... I'm glad I did it. I don't know that I need to or want to do it again, but I'm glad I had that experience. I had been warned that there would be nausea, and I didn't experience that at first, but several hours in, I did start to feel it, and I never did vomit, but it felt like there was a hurricane in my gut. That's how I described it at the time.
Do you want to tell it in like story form? What happened, or?
Well, it's a long story, but I was traveling with my friend Aldrin through Southeast Asia, and our last stop, next to last stop, was Laos before Thailand, and we went to. You've been to Laos, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Once.
So
very positive experience.
Was it? What's the name of that village? Luang Prabang, I want to say.
That exists there. I only went to Vientiane.
Okay, Vientiane. We went there too, but this was. I think this was Luang Prabang, which is on the Western tourist.
Sure,
itinerary,
sure.
I guess.
Yeah.
There are a lot of it's. I guess it's like a village constructed specifically for tourists like us. I mean, I almost felt like we were on some kind of tour that was designed specifically for us. But anyway, they have these cafes with the happy pizza. Right. Of course, as they sometimes do in Thailand as well. But also on the menu, I mean, this is like the Golden Triangle area where a lot of the world's opium was, and I guess still is, manufactured, although maybe now more is in Afghanistan. I don't know. But, and this, these are countries with draconian drug laws, right? But on the menu, you can order an opium pipe.
Wow.
How is that possible? I still don't understand that. So anyway, we arrived exhausted. We had been on one of those long boat tours, like all day on the Mekong River.
Mm-hmm.
And we arrived in the evening, and I was exhausted. So I had decided, okay, yeah, I'll try opium, but, I want to wait till I'm in a better frame of mind and, physical condition. But my friend Aldrin, maybe I shouldn't mention his name. I don't know if he's comfortable with this.
As long as you keep the last name out,
yeah,
it'll be okay.
Well, anyway, when we arrived, he saw it on the menu, and he's like, well, I'm going to order a pipe. So I went to the back with him, and, I said, well, I'll just observe. So I saw him, take a hit, and then it seemed foolish not to try it myself, so I said, fuck it. And then I took a hit, and it was a big hit. And, it had a much more powerful effect on me than it did on him. I hadn't even been, smoking weed. It hadn't been doing that recently, so I think, whereas, my traveling companion had, so maybe it had less effect on him, but it had a very pronounced effect on me.
I don't think there necessarily would be a correlation, by the way, between the potent. I mean, it could just be your constitution.
He seemed to think there was, but maybe you're right. I don't know.
Maybe it was the quantity, or people just react very differently. You're an artist, so you're sensitive.
I don't know, but I certainly felt it, and I remember going into one of those internet cafes, where you pay to use the computer and check your email for half an hour or whatever. Sure. I don't know. Do they still have those? I don't know.
Oh yeah, bro. But we have them. In Russia. It's for gamers, right? Gamers will go to there because they'll have computers that are really
okay.
High speed and
Well, in Korea they called them PC bang, right?
Right.
PC rooms. So you can play games, or I just went to check email and chat with friends or whatever. But I remember typing on the keyboard, and I felt like an insect as I was hunched over with my hands on the keys. I felt like a praying mantis. I thought I was in contact with the my insect nature, whatever that might be, and I could feel all the wires underneath the keys. I was very conscious of those. I remember that clearly. So, and I guess that was kind of like a psychedelic experience, which, opium's not generally considered a psychedelic. But I recently read this essay by Baudelaire, the great French poet who dabbled in opium, and it was actually a book of essays by Baudelaire and another French author on opium, wine, and hashish. And in the introduction, this guy was he seemed to be classifying opium as a hallucinogen, which is not usually done, but there were certain hallucinogenic effects. Later, after some other drama, I was trying to fall asleep. I closed my eyes, and I just saw these explosions of stars, diamonds, and flowers, which was similar to a hallucinogenic experience, kind of trippy.
Was it euphoric in any way?
Oh yeah, I mean and there was a moment where I turned to my friend. They have those cafes where they're just I mean, they're basically opium dens, right? Like people just sit there and zone out on couches watching Friends and The Office on loop. You know, like they just show an entire season of one of these Western television shows, and I remember feeling very.
By the way, no, sorry to interrupt, but like, just I'll give you another image. It's in my head now, which is like from. It's some classic mob film that I hadn't watched, and I started watching it recently on Netflix.
Mm-hmm.
And it starts with like some really intense opium den scenes. Does that sound familiar?
Oh, is it Once Upon a Time in America?
Yes, that's it.
Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah.
Yeah, so those like I just saw that kind of recently, and with all those like that opium den scene was pretty
like in the Chinatown,
vivid.
In the
Exactly.
Chinatown of New York.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
That's with De Niro. That's
right.
Yeah. Oh, gangster films. We have to do an episode on gangster films.
Sure.
Or, pick one. But that's not the one I would pick. But I know
Yeah,
the
I didn't even get through it.
Yeah.
I wasn't really that captivated by it
it's,
in the beginning. So.
Yeah, it's not my favorite, but I guess it's worth watching. Where was I?
Well, what's like the most like
you asked about
crazy part of that
well,
trip?
I'll get to that, but you asked about
Sorry.
the euphoria. So
Yeah.
So I remember I turned to my friend, and I don't know why this thought occurred to me, but I said, you know what? Someone could cut my arm off right now, and I wouldn't even feel it. That's how like sedated and anesthetized I felt. Ooh, here we go with aesthetics again. Anesthetized, not feeling, not sensing. So that was kind of a euphoric feeling, just I felt quite calm and content. Of course, after the effects of the drug had worn off, I would probably regret having my arm chopped off, but I remember saying that, like I feel so relaxed and calm that I mean, it would be a great anesthetic, right? Like if you had to.
We use a lot of derivatives from that, bro. Like that's
of course
the stuff that people are addicted to. That's
morphine.
All opiate derivative.
Morphine is an opium derivative.
No, but the one that everyone's addicted to in America. What's the
OxyContin?
one that? Yeah, exactly. OxyContin.
Yeah,
that's a big one. I think anyway. Either way, the stuff that we get. Yeah, the stuff that we get when we are at the when we're getting surgery, or even Percocets, right?
Okay. Anyway, of course, it has that.
But anyway,
that quality, and so that was, that was not unpleasant. But later, I think it was later in the evening, before the nausea started, like I thought, for some reason, I thought of myself as a tree, and I was standing in the road with my arms in various positions, trying to imitate the branches of a tree.
This is what the listeners are here for, bro. This is what we want.
What do you mean?
More of this.
Oh, more of this. Okay. Well, then we were walking along these, the little dirt roads of this little village, and I remember thinking, this is the part where I fall. And that's exactly what I did. I just went face down in the road. I don't know why. I just collapsed. And then I got up, and I think that's...
Was it like slightly willingly, you think?
I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to do it because I didn't even like break my fall with my arms. I just fell directly on my face, and I fucked up my knee for like, years. It was unpleasant, and I woke up the next day with like gritty little stones in my mouth. I think I did wash my face, but it was that part was not fun, and I think that's when the waves of nausea hit me, and some older loud gentlemen came over, and they knew what was going on. They asked my friend, they're like, did he have an opium pipe? And my friend's like, yeah. And they were just like very kind and
Were they locals?
yeah, local Lao. They were
Lao people.
locals, you know,
Wow.
older guys, and they're just like they were putting their arms around me, saying it's okay, it's okay. I never,
Damn.
I never felt like
Such a cliche.
I never,
White boy.
I never felt like they were gonna pick my pocket or anything. They were just genuinely concerned, and they said, "Oh, it'll pass, it's okay." And then we went back to the guest house, and I walked up the stairs, and maybe I imagined it. Again, maybe this is the hallucinogenic effect. But on the way down, there were these other tourists, these a couple of white girls, you know. They walked down the stairs, and the look they gave me was like, "Oh my God, who the fuck is this guy?" But again, I think maybe I imagined it, because I said, "Did you see the look they gave us?" And my friend was like, "What do you mean? They just ignored us." But to me, it was like a very, very severe...
That's like, sounds like just strong weed.
Exactly.
Strong
It
weed
was
paranoia.
exactly like
Right.
weed paranoia. It was like, marijuana, the worst kind of marijuana paranoia, which is why, there may be something to the fact that my friend, who had been smoking a lot of weed, was less affected by the opium. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, that was a bit long-winded, but that's the opium story.
Okay. Cool.
Did I leave anything important out?
Just if there's any more, you got all the drama parts, right? Because you mentioned the word drama, and like that's when my
Well, the drama was the collapse. That was...
okay.
I wasn't planning for that to happen, although I did foresee it immediately before. I very clearly remember thinking, this is the part where I fall, and fall I did. That's exactly what happened.
And did it leave you like with any resolve either way as to whether you wanted to try it again?
Well,
Obviously you didn't want to fall again.
No, but as I said, like, I'm glad I did it, but I didn't feel any strong desire to do it again. On the other hand, that was, how long ago was that? Almost 15 years ago or more.
Mm-hmm.
And so, maybe now would be a good time to do it again. And if I were in chronic pain, like let's say I had some horrible debilitating disease and my body was in horrible pain, I would probably try to smoke it every day, just to kill the pain.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
All right, I don't know. This is only the second paragraph, and we already got
the Joe Rogan experience.
We already got off on this tangent. All right, do we need to read every
I was
line?
picturing myself as Joe Rogan in that little encounter, as like he like eggs on the guests to kind of like
Right.
Yeah, so I was Joe Rogan.
You need to say, "It's really bizarre. It's so strange. It's really odd."
That's true.
All right. Maybe we can just pick certain lines. In the third paragraph, I like this. The United States was the creation of men who believed that each man has the right to do what he wants with his own life as long as he does not interfere with his neighbor's pursuit of happiness. And then the parenthetical, that his neighbor's idea of happiness is persecuting others, does confuse matters a bit.
This is the kind of stuff that I just feel like... This is why I don't love this essay, though. I don't know. These kind of like references to ideas of what the U.S. is supposed to be. I don't know. It just seems so...
That's what I do like about it.
No.
Well, I mean, there's
nobody's believing in these myths. Come on.
Well, that's
so empty.
He's saying that's the propaganda, right? Like idealistically, that's what it's supposed to be, but in reality,
but come on, reality is just, we know it's just a constant grind for power and survival. I don't know. I just don't, any kind of even appealing to the quote unquote best of what the U.S. can be just seems kind of lame,
Well,
or
that's an interesting point. Maybe when we talk about Gore Vidal himself, we can debate that. I mean, maybe this is a good time to do that. Okay,
Do you know what I'm saying, though?
Yes, I do. I mean, that rings very hollow. You know, the founding fathers.
Exactly.
Yes,
Like,
but
it's not really.
But you know, Vidal is a great critic of that. I don't know how much you know about him. I did send you like the link to the documentary about him.
Yeah, I watched a little bit.
Okay. Well, so you know his background, right? Like his grandfather was a senator, and he's from this patrician elite himself. And he, you know, one of his...
Do you want to define patrician?
Well, aristocratic, you know.
Okay, yeah. Mm-hmm.
The 1%, as we would say today, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is his background. You know, he was related by marriage to Jackie Onassis, and he was friends with the Kennedys, and you know, he was related to Al Gore. So he's very well connected in that sense, or was.
Yeah, and I found that kind of off-putting, to be honest.
Okay.
Yeah.
But that's an accident of birth, right? Like,
no, I'm not something I held against him, but I felt like in that film, like all that was kind of adding to this allure, you know, and just I don't get it. I don't get excited by that stuff, you know. It's not stuff that like, ooh.
Well, of course not.
He's connected.
Of course not. I mean, that in itself is not the reason why I read Gore Vidal, and I recommend that others do. Rather, it's because he's kind of a class traitor, you know, like he's a critic of all of those people as well as the, you know, American public in general. I mean, that if he's just a cheerleader for them and he's just like an apologist for them, like his nemesis William F. Buckley, then of course he's worthless. But that wasn't his position. Now, some people, maybe I haven't really heard this argument made that it was all a smokescreen, and actually he was just a kind of gatekeeper. I mean, you know, he's a pretty cogent, trenchant critic of American power, and he has a profound historical perspective, I would argue. I mean, his Narratives of Empire series, it's 7 novels, so it's a heptalogy. I've only read one of them, but the American Empire, or sorry, not the one of the novels in the series is called Empire, but the one I read is called The Golden Age, which is about the rise of the American Empire in the World War II era, in particular during the reign of FDR. So he, in his view of American history, you see, he always says that this is a key idea if we're talking about Gore Vidal. He actually says this in The Golden Age. He says America pretends that it's Greece, but it was never anything but Rome. You understand? It pretended in its propaganda and its founding documents and so on that it was all about democracy and freedom and liberty and all this. But really, it was always just a military power bent on empire conquest and, you know, capitalistic expansion.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
and also maybe in some way like an imitation, right?
An imitation.
I mean, that's also what I think about with Rome.
An imitation
I don't want to be... well, I don't know.
Of Greece? Oh, yeah. Well, yeah. Sure. And, you know, I guess in the case of the U.S., it's an imitation of the British Empire, maybe.
Right.
The British Empire, the British Empire itself is an imitation of the Roman and others and so on. I mean, there's nothing new under the sun. It's always looking back to some predecessor, you could say. But I think that's valid, and he basically argues in this book that FDR knew about Pearl Harbor in advance, and he allowed it to happen because he wanted to drag the U.S. into World War II, because FDR saw the opportunity to replace Britain as the global superpower. Mm-hmm. And he says basically that's what it was all about. He argues that, he said somewhere, I'm not sure if it's in the Golden Age, but I know he said somewhere that, Lincoln was Julius Caesar, and then FDR was Augustus. So, like, the Republic died with Lincoln when he took on all these executive powers, but then it became an actual empire, and like the Augustan age, that's the golden age of the title, that occurred with FDR. I mean, it's
interesting.
First of all, that novel, it's a great novel, and
isn't FDR supposed to be like one of the heroes of the left?
Yes.
Or am I getting that wrong?
No, for sure he is. But and JFK too, and he has very critical things to say of both FDR and JFK. He felt like he basically, in the novel, the narrative is that FDR arranged things so that the Republican nominee would be a pro-war candidate, so that even if he lost, the U.S. would still get into the war. Like, there was who was it? Hoover or Coolidge was like a anti-interventionist candidate on the Republican side. And then, like, FDR and his people sabotaged the campaign. Again, this is according to Vidal's reading of history. And ensured that, was it Dewey? It was Dewey. Ensured that, am I right about that? I think it was Dewey who later...
Jamie, can you check that?
Yeah, exactly. Who later was, defeated by Truman. But anyway, he maneuvered things so that the pro-war candidate would be running on the Republican side. So either way, Democrat or Republican, the U.S. would get into the war and be on the road to empire. Okay, I've gone on too long about that. But this is the background for statements like this, right? Like, he's saying, okay, the U.S. had all these noble sentiments, but never, ever, ever has the country lived up to them. I appreciate that.
I do. I'm just saying, like, is it naive to say that, quote, the U.S. was the creation of men who believed that each man has the right to do what he wants with his own life, as long as all that, right? Is that really
assuming
really
you're
a true characterization?
Assuming you're not a slave or an American Indian or a woman or
it seems to be
a poor white that doesn't own property. Yeah, of course.
And even in just this idea of like exceptionalism with these, these particular men had these noble ideas, like they were. So I don't know. In that sense,
I agree with you. I think that's. I mean, I'm understanding what you disliked about this and why you were underwhelmed. Yeah, good. All right, keep going.
Okay. This is a startling notion. Well, maybe I need to backtrack a little bit. So the notion, the reminder that everyone should pursue happiness without interfering others. That's the notion, right?
Yeah.
Okay. This is a startling notion to the current generation of Americans who reflect on our system of public education, which has made the Bill of Rights, literally, unacceptable to a majority of high school graduates, see the annual Purdue reports, who now form the silent majority, a phrase which that underestimated wit Richard Nixon took from Homer, who used it to describe the dead. This paragraph was actually like a bit challenging for me when I read it, so maybe you can help me unpack it a little bit. Just in the sense of...
the Bill of Rights, and I think it's true today too is unacceptable. Those rights are unacceptable to a majority of high school
That's what I
graduates.
didn't understand. Yeah, that's the part I didn't understand.
Well, he cites the annual Purdue reports, which I don't even.
But why
I
are
don't
they
even,
unacceptable?
I don't even.
I
know
remember Googling them too.
I don't even
Googled
know
them
what
at the time,
what at the annual Purdue.
and I couldn't
reports.
find anything.
Yeah, I mean Purdue is a university. Maybe he's referring to like
Some kind of studies. Maybe,
studies. I don't know, but what do you think? Is it true? Whether forget about high school graduates, but do American citizens in the year 2022 do they? First of all, do they even know what the fuck the Bill of Rights are, and do they agree with them? Clearly not. I mean,
But which parts are
well,
most objectionable?
take the most important, perhaps the First Amendment, right? Freedom of speech. Do people really believe in freedom of speech? You can say anything. I mean, people are like calling for censorship, and the people who claim they're for free speech only really care about free speech for their side, but they want everyone else shut down, you know? I'm thinking of those right-wing morons that complain excessively about so-called cancel culture. And I'm not saying that doesn't happen, but those people are like, we want to be able to say anything we want, but then they don't have a fucking word of support for Julian Assange or real victims. I mean, people who are really canceled, like imprisoned, killed, and so on. I mean, to say nothing of like Palestinian rights activists, right? Like they're never going to come out in support of them in their free speech crusades, right? They just want the right to say hateful things to people they don't like. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I appreciated about the Stuart Lee that I sent you today. Because actually, I'm not necessarily Stuart Lee's biggest fan. I don't know if you know Stuart Lee. Beyond the clip I sent you.
That was the first I had heard of him.
Okay, then I gotta send you some old clips which you will absolutely love. But he's
I didn't love this one. That was,
okay.
Yeah.
I didn't love the clip in its entirety, but just to give you a tiny bit of context, so he's like the left-wing intellectual comedian. Okay, so he's like he writes for The Guardian sometimes, but he is like very smart, and I think before the culture wars, quote unquote culture wars, he made some of his like some of his best stuff. I mean, he's just got some stuff about like 9/11, which is just hysterical, and I don't know, he's really clever, and I don't always like what he has to say, but either way, I liked the clip I sent you, and because it's like, I feel like we needed to hear that, you know, like that exists too. So it's like the hysteria about cancel culture, he pushes back on it, right? Mm-hmm. And I thought it was smart how he said like, yeah, I can't say anything except I can get this voice out for $60 million like on every TV. I mean, I don't know. I like how he took that side to task on that.
Yeah.
That part?
Yeah. I just thought
and like I like Ricky Gervais, and I think he doesn't necessarily hate Ricky Gervais, but I think it's a good point.
Well, I didn't take it to be so much, and people don't know what we're talking about, but we can.
I know, and I apologize.
We can include the clip in the show notes, but
yeah.
And by the way, I'm publishing show notes on my Substack. I'm a bit behind, but I just recently posted show notes for episode 3. This is now episode 17 or something. So I'm a bit behind, but you know, I'm getting there, and I'll try to post more regularly there. But if you want to take a deep dive, check out the show notes on my Substack. All right, so
if you want, I can give a tiny bit of context to the clip or not.
Well, I was just going to say that I think he wasn't criticizing Ricky Gervais so much as those people who, you know, mindlessly defend him.
Oh, he was criticizing Ricky Gervais. He absolutely was.
To some degree, but I think it was more about Ricky Gervais as a cultural phenomenon that has been like appropriated by these right-wing people I'm talking about who babble on about free speech but are not consistent, right? Like they don't have one fucking word to say in support of Julian Assange.
Yeah,
they're
but I also
totally
think
fine if
he's
he-
mainly criticizing like laziness in comedy. This like tendency now that different comedians are recycling this one act where they rant about cancel culture and they say things that are provocative about like trans people.
Just try to be edgy.
And it's kind of like it's lost its freshness.
Sure.
That has become a cliche.
That point was well taken. I just thought
so
that at one point he says the worst part about this bit is that it's gone on too long, and I said, yeah, exactly.
Me too.
But anyway,
that's very Stuart Lee, though. By the way,
well, that's fine. I like being made uncomfortable by performers like that, And he acknowledges that, and he's like, that didn't get as many laughs as I had hoped or thought, and that's fine. I don't care. I'm gonna keep.
It is pretty extreme.
I'm gonna keep
though.
going.
I mean, it's performative, right? That comes back to like, yeah, we've discussed this before, but that's like
comedy is performance.
The Andy Kaufman,
yes,
the whole
yes.
like making you uncomfortable.
Sure. All right.
But anyway, I would have preferred more of the speech that was beginning, because I thought that was interesting what he had to say.
Yeah.
Sorry, just wanted to get your take on that.
Okay, well, back to the essay. I don't know. I thought this was going to be a short episode, and now, like, we're not even halfway done, it seems.
Okay.
Let me just paraphrase. The next paragraph, I've highlighted this. Now one can hear the warning rumble begin. And basically, the idea is that if you legalize drugs, then everyone's going to become an addict. And this is a great line. The commies will stop us from making everyone free. This is 1970, right? But just substitute.
I like the way Ginsberg said it better.
Right. Sure.
But yeah.
But then he says, yet it seems most unlikely that any reasonably sane person will become a drug addict if he knows in advance what addiction is going to be like. And then I'm going to just take your paragraph. Is everyone reasonably sane? No. Some people will always become drug addicts, just as some people will always become alcoholics. And it is just too bad. I mean, fair point, right? Every man, however, has the power and should have the right. I remember this line when I first read it too. To kill himself if he chooses. I thought, yeah, that's right. How can you stop someone?
I mean, I guess this feels dated though. And so like, and I know that the vibe has changed. Neither of us are in America anymore. But I'd be curious to know, like, I think Biden tweeted this week that nobody should be in prison for marijuana possession, something like that. And he's been, even though he hasn't been someone who's traditionally pro marijuana, I mean, in terms of legislation, but
the exact opposite.
He's
of
bowed,
that.
but he's bowed
Let's be
to
clear.
pressure.
Let's be clear. He's been the exact opposite of that historically.
Okay, but he's bowed to pressure now, and he's making statements like that, So it would just be good. I don't know how confident you are to be able to like speak to the tenor of the drug conversation now in America, but I know it's obviously changed hugely. I mean, we know what is the current status of marijuana, for example. It's definitely legal in a lot of places, and the general public opinion has shifted significantly from the past generation to the present generation.
Well,
so that's why.
Yes,
yeah.
But on the federal level, nothing gets done about it, right? Like there are certain states that have legalized it or decriminalized it, but the war on drugs still goes on, and there's still people in prison now on nonviolent drug offenses. Many people. And yes, he is tweeting things, but what is he doing? I heard recently that the people that were Did he say he was going to release some people? It turned out that the people he claimed to be releasing were like non-existent because there was no one who was in federal prison for exclusively a drug charge. Like they were in federal prison. Everyone is in federal prison for something else with a drug charge on top. So none of those people actually will be let out of prison, allegedly. I don't know. Anyway, it's good that he's stating that, and that's the message he wants to convey. But at the same time, he fired people on his own staff who admitted to using pot. So is he really doing anything? I'm skeptical.
Okay, yeah.
You know, but let's not.
But the attitudes have changed in America.
Well,
right?
Yes, but again, the overwhelming majority is in favor of legalization, I think, right? Poll after poll says that. But it still doesn't happen because why? Why doesn't it happen? Because
of money.
Yeah, because they're, and you know, again, Gore Vidal mentions this at the end of this essay.
Right, money is like and I think that when we talk about war now too, right? I mean, it's the main issue behind everything.
Yeah. I mean, even to the point of potentially blowing up the world.
Yeah, exactly. That's like how insane
I mean,
is.
in a way, this is a trivial issue, whether or not people, I mean, it's not. It's an important issue, but you could say that compared to the prospect of nuclear Armageddon, maybe it's a bit less of a priority. All right, anyway, let's get through this. And I'm not sticking to, you know, the plan that I had originally suggested, but we're already...
Don't blame me, bro.
No, we're already... I know the opium story went on too long, but we're already like...
No, that's what the audience comes here for, bro. They want
that?
Story.
Well...
Yeah.
We're already an hour in, and, you know, we're still not done with the text itself.
Bro, you act like we're drowning underwater or something.
We are, man! There's a time crunch. Okay.
Yeah.
It says... This okay.
It's a freewheeling conversation.
It's freewheeling.
Yeah.
You're plagiarizing me. Okay. But I was plagiarizing Bob Dylan, so okay, we have no public memory of anything that happened before last Tuesday. Come on, man. That's a great line. This is why he calls this is, you know, his phrase
Come on, man.
This is his phrase, the United States of amnesia. This is why he said he wrote his Narratives of Empire series. That's the whole purpose, because if he didn't record that, people would forget. Yeah, he said he didn't want to do that, but no one else was talking about it. No one else was talking about basically the empire, and certainly no one else was like writing fiction about it.
Yeah.
So he points out that, you know, it's been forgotten. Alcohol was forbidden to the people by a Congress that thought it had a divine mission to stamp out demon rum, and so launched the greatest crime wave in the country's history, caused thousands of deaths from bad alcohol, and created a general and persisting contempt for the laws of the United States. Valid point, isn't it?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
And continuing, the same thing is happening today, but the government has learned nothing from past attempts at prohibition, not to mention repression, because it is the United States of amnesia. And I think that's the title of the documentary I sent you. Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. So whose fault? Evil men like the mafiosi, permissive Dr. Leary, Dr. Spock, wild-eyed Dr. Leary? No. The government of the United States was responsible for those deaths. The bureaucratic machine has a vested interest in playing cops and robbers. I always love that line too. I mean, maybe it was because I was so young when I read it. Maybe it was because it was in like the early days of the war on drugs, or not that early, but you know, like the 80s. That was the Reagan era with, you know, Just Say No, and it was the war on drugs that Nixon started got amped up under Reagan. That's for sure. And so I thought, yeah, that is what's going on. Like, the bureaucratic machine has a vested interest in playing cops and robbers. That's all this is. And
Right.
does anyone want to seriously argue against that now? Does anyone dispute that now?
Yeah, and I think that in another sense, I mean, we talked about how public perceptions towards drugs, especially weed, has changed. And I think that also the general public mood has become much more cynical about the government, you know, across the board. So, you know, it reminds me of the Trump interview, like, where he's like, "You think we're so great?" Do you remember when that caused such a stir?
I know a lot of killers.
That was amazing, though. That was like Trump at his best. You think we're so great? It was true, though, right? I mean, that's the point. Like, my only point with that stuff is like when that kind of rhetoric is such a part of the mainstream conversation, like, it's publicly kind of fine now to accept that the government is like it's just very, very corrupt.
Well, but you know, a lot of people buy into the game of lesser evilism, right? Like, well,
Sure.
yeah, it's corrupt,
Sure.
but my team is better than my neighbor's team.
Right.
So that's, you know, one of the divide and conquer strategies of the deep state or the shadow government that never leaves power, regardless of who is nominally in control, whether it's Team R or Team D, red or blue, right? Those people never leave. For example, Victoria Nuland, like, she's in every administration. You know, she was there with Dick Cheney, and she's there now. I don't know what her official position is now, but she's still, you know, she's never stopped, right? She's been...
I don't know who this person is.
Well, she's the one that was caught on tape in 2014 saying, "We've picked the new Ukraine president," you know. The one who said, "Fuck the EU." Remember?
I have some, like, at least associations.
Yeah, she was there on the ground in Ukraine handing out sandwiches and shaking hands and, you know, encouraging the uprising. And then they were saying, like, okay, this is the guy we want to be president. And guess what? He's the one that became president in 2014 or whatever.
Yeah.
So, you know, did anyone ever vote for her? Was she elected? No, but she's been there all along. Again, like, back to the Dick Cheney days. She was one of his proteges. She's a neocon married to one of those Kagan brothers, you know, Robert Kagan or whoever. New Project for the New American Century, right? And they're always around, whether it's a Republican or a Democrat, you know, administration. Okay. Anyhow, he says that's not going to happen. In other words, the bureaucratic machine's going to keep going, right? Because if there was no money in it, the Bureau of Narcotics would wither away, something they're not about to do without a struggle.
Yeah, it's like I was kind of daydreaming today about nuclear Armageddon, as one does,
Mm-hmm.
and
Fantasizing.
Yeah, kind of. Well, I'll come to that. And I was just thinking, like, you know, at what point kind of the stability of governments would crumble, let's say, and Liana and I, let's say we're escaping this Armageddon and we're going somewhere like away from the nuclear fallout dust, and how long would it take for bureaucracy to decide that we're not allowed to be in the same place together? You know what I mean? Like, how long? Like, bureaucracy is such a rooted part of just being human. It's like, all I want is to be able to, like, be in the same geographical sphere with her, and that simple fact is so challenging. And
you're talking about Liliana now?
Yeah, just talking about, like, being with Liliana physically, like, and how difficult in a way it can be just because of our different citizenships.
Well, if you're asking me, this trouble goes back to the time when, you know, as a species we adopted agriculture, you know. So it's been a long time coming. Like, we should have.
But I mean, just like
powerful
bureaucracy.
We should have remained hunter-gatherers. Well, bureaucracy is a direct result of that, right? Like, stationary people with agriculture and you know, grain storage. They need armies. They need hierarchies. They need bureaucracies, which leads to all our problems: war, repression, and so on.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if we were hunter-gatherers, we would just go pick the herb and roll it up and smoke it. We don't need anyone's...
Yeah, as soon as you said the word herb, I got excited.
We don't need anyone's permission. But, yeah, we're going back to the Stone Age now. Stone Age economics, as Marshall Solins calls it. All right.
Stone Age.
There you go. Stoned Age.
Exactly.
All right. Let's end this. Last paragraph. Do you want to read it?
I'd love to, yeah.
You do the honors.
Will anything sensible be done? Of course not. The American people are as devoted to the idea of sin and its punishment as they are to making money, and fighting drugs is nearly as big a business as pushing them. Since the combination of sin and money is irresistible, particularly to the professional politician, the situation will only grow worse. Isn't
that beautiful? That's a fantastic concluding paragraph, I think.
Yeah, I liked it. It doesn't really seem like a call to action when you leave on such a kind of pessimistic and futile tone, right? But in a way, like, I appreciate that.
Well, this reminds me of one of Gore Vidal's sayings, and it's mentioned in that documentary. He says, "Style is knowing who you are, what you want to say, and not giving a damn." I mean, that's his style. He's not going to phrase it in a way that comforts you or makes you feel better.
Mm-hmm.
And his prediction is actually right. You know, it did get worse, and you could say it's better in terms of public perception, but, you know, we still have the war on drugs. This is 52.
Well, I guess it got
52
worse,
years,
but maybe then it got better.
This is 52 years after the article was published. It got better. Is it better? I guess.
It's better.
With certain states legalizing.
Right. Medical marijuana is more of a thing now, right?
Yeah, that's true. What about legalization versus decriminalization? Have you heard this argument? Like, some people say, you know, oh, I'm in favor of decriminalizing, but not legalizing. Let's not go that far.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I guess sometimes things have to be incremental. But no, it does seem a bit silly the way that we make these relatively trivial differences that we find more palatable.
I mean, if it's easier to get people on board with that, and something would actually be done, of course I would be in favor of it. Of course it would be better to decriminalize than to continue to criminalize wherever it is criminalized, you know?
It just reminds me, sometimes when they put these things on ballot measures, like the wording can end up swaying things like 10% or 15%.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So it's like...
And even to the extent that people are like voting for the opposite of what they think they're voting for.
Exactly.
You know, that's
exactly.
that sometimes happens. Like, wait,
Right.
what?
Oh, it's insane. Yeah.
Do you not agree that you disagree that?
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's tie up some loose ends here.
Sure.
Now that we're an hour and 15 minutes in, and I feel like we're drowning.
Like, I would like to, first of all, like, obviously I'm in a country that is incredibly repressive, so let's just not forget that had two major, you know, publicly loud issues recently, both with the WNBA player Brittany something and then this American teacher. So they've both been imprisoned recently for possessing marijuana.
Yeah.
Which is unfortunate. And then I just also want to say that, like, yeah, I wish like weed was a bigger part of my life now. You know, I haven't smoked for years. But I have to be in like the right situation.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to be like in a very relaxed work situation and social situation. But I mean, like, in general, like, I feel positive about marijuana as a drug. And
absolutely. Even if I'm not
had many good and bad experiences. Yes. And I wouldn't even be able to say which I had more of.
Right.
But I still, like, the good aspects really added like a layer to life.
Yes.
That, like, for example, I just can't have now. I can't have the connections to music that I had on weed. I can't have the connection to food that I had on weed. Like, to nature. All these things that can be like an amazing part of being, of just existence, that you can access through this drug. You can have these like really powerful experiences that can be profound and inspirational.
Yes. And
so in that sense, like, I really like, sorry, I just really like, I'm an advocate for keeping that part of the human experience.
Absolutely. And the advocacy doesn't change even if one is not currently using, or even if one has no plans to currently use. It's just like a general principle. Like, number one, there's no way this should be proscribed and prohibited, you know? It should be available. That's it. It's as simple as that. Even if whether I want to personally use it or not, maybe I never use it again in my life, but to like deny other people the right to that, it's absurd.
Yeah,
completely absurd. I actually recently discovered that here in Taiwan there's a lawyer and maybe a law firm that is like a strong advocate for legalization here. And she represents like foreigners who get in trouble for, you know, drug charges here in Taiwan. There was a horrible case. There was a foreigner, I think he was from some Eastern European nation. He was married to a Taiwanese, and he was growing pot plants on his balcony or something, and a neighbor reported him. And he got busted. He got taken to court, and he didn't know what was going on. It was all in Chinese, and the judge read out the sentence. He turns to his lawyer. He says, "What did the judge say?" And the judge said, "Oh, you're getting 10 years or whatever it was." And he says, "Oh no, fuck that." He pulls out some scissors from his pocket, jabs them into his neck.
Holy
and
shit.
He died on the way to the hospital. He committed suicide in the fucking courtroom after
shit.
being, sentenced to this ridiculous, being handed down this ridiculous sentence of, I think it was 10 years, maybe it was 5, maybe it was 20, but yeah, that's what it leads to. Is it worth it? Was that worth it, Taiwan? You got rid of a few plants. Do you feel safer now? You feel better? So that happened. I mean, to say nothing of all the nonviolent drug offenders in the States and elsewhere. I mean, all over. It's in Russia, anywhere. It's completely absurd, criminal, disgusting, ridiculous.
Agreed.
Okay, and here's another random fact. I'm now reading Freud's interpretation of dreams, right? I'm not like, it's bedtime reading. Like, I'll read a chapter before I fall asleep, and it often does put me to sleep. It's not like the most engaging text I've ever read, but
yeah, that's what I remember of when I dabbled.
But it's interesting. Did you know that he was a major cokehead and a strong coke advocate? Did you know this?
No.
It's in the introduction. It talks about his cocaine usage, but he talks about it in the text too. Like he wrote an important paper on cocaine, as a medical doctor, and he may have been like, I don't know if he was addicted, but he was a lifelong coke user. I think he got, was it lung cancer or not?
Sorry, but those two statements sound funny next to each other.
What?
I don't know if he was addicted, but he was a lifelong user.
Maybe he could quit at any time.
Especially talking about cocaine, bro, which is just like insanely
well,
addictive.
He had.
I don't know if he's addicted.
I think he had.
He used it 20 times a day.
I don't know if it was that long, but he had like jaw cancer or something. Not lung cancer, but he was also a lifelong smoker of cigars, and I think he had like jaw cancer. So he was using the coke as an anesthetic, or a painkiller. Yeah,
that's the only drug that from my experience, where you really like, you don't want the experience to stop. Like, that's the kind of thing that you're like licking the bag towards the end, just like, let me find like one extra little piece of powder to like rub on my gums. I mean, because the kind of shift down from like the coke high to like the post coke high, you feel it so acutely, and the post coke experience is the worst. I mean, that made me never want to do it again, because it's just like, it's like so irritating.
I'm going to make an astounding admission. I've never done coke.
It's not that astounding, but yeah.
I've just, for whatever reason, it never happened. And now, I don't know, at my age, I don't know that I would do it. Maybe if I were around it, I would consider it, but I've never had like an overwhelming desire to try it.
Yeah, I don't think it's gonna like change your life, I mean, in the way that some drugs might like open something up for you.
Right.
Yeah. But
I've got something else in my notes here.
Okay.
In that documentary, Gore Vidal is described as a synthesis of Mark Twain and Henry James.
I'm going to plead the fifth on Henry James.
Well, it's like plain spokenness in the, I don't know, frontier American style, and artistic, literary, I don't want to say pretentiousness, but, concern with aesthetic principles. I think that,
and the latter is Henry James.
Yeah. Well, that's the stereotype.
Phew, I got that.
That's
right.
the stereotype.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not, fanatical reader of Henry James, but he does have that more like European aesthetic sensibility, I guess. Whereas,
Do you want to give our listeners like one recommendation if they wanted to get into some Gore Vidal?
well, yes.
And don't give like an overly ambitious like 7-set book collection.
Well, just read The Golden Age. That's a good
Okay.
one. Or okay, that's like his Narratives of Empire series. Other great Gore Vidal books that I've read: Creation. This is an historical novel. He's a great historical novelist. Okay, let's say that
What's the book that's the most of a page turner?
I would say Creation. This is
Okay.
This is written by a fictional Persian who is he's an ambassador for, is it Darius or Xerxes? But he's a Persian ambassador. He visits Greece. He knows the famous Greeks, the philosophers, Herodotus, the playwrights, and then he also travels to other parts of the world. He sees the Buddha. I think he goes to China as well. So it's a fascinating fictional study of that period around the 5th century BC,
What kind of tone
during
does it
which
have?
time, so many developments occurred. There's a term for that age. I can't remember it. I want to say the axial age. Is that right? What kind of tone?
I mean, is it like reverential? Is it skeptical? Is it whimsical towards all these like historical figures that
I mean, he has different. Well, he's critical of the Greeks because he's a Persian, right? And he feels like the Persians were unfairly maligned by Greek culture, which is, a legitimate argument to make. It is called the Axial Age, 500 to 300 BCE, the period during which most of the main religious and spiritual traditions emerged in Eurasian societies. So it's called creation. It's like the creation of our world or our cultural, mindset that still influences us today. Oh, I think he like in China he sees or meets Confucius or people who were his students, and Lao Tzu and so on.
It sounds interesting.
Oh,
for sure.
it's that's probably the best thing of his that I've read. But
I've had like two fairly good friends. Well, Robert, one of my best friends, who I talked about with you before, he's a big Gore Vidal fan.
what are his
And then my
recommendations?
I don't know. I'd have to ask him. But I mean, the point is like Gore Vidal being endorsed by the both of you is like definitely significant for me. And then my friend Rich, his partner Joe, she's also a fan. So yeah, it's definitely a area of ignorance for me that I need to.
Well, here's another one. Julian. This is a historical novel as well. It's about Julian the Apostate. This is the Roman emperor that after, Constantine basically converted the empire to Christianity. There was an emperor who came after him named Julian, and he was the apostate. He tried to revive the Greco-Roman tradition, like he refused to accept the Christian. He refused to accept Christianity, and he wanted to revive Greco-Roman religion. It's not as good as Creation, but it's good. It's worth reading. Again, he's a great historical novelist.
Okay.
All right.
Cool.
So, what's next? We've got some poetry coming next, don't we?
Yeah, we're gonna read some Anna Akhmatova.
Akhmatova.
Akhmatova, yeah, not Anna Akhmatova, which And actually, I'm going to be taking a group of students there next Friday to her museum. And I think it's... I like to romanticize that field trip and like think that it's quite brave in the current political climate that we're in, because she's someone who was repeatedly banned from publishing during the Soviet Union. She was exiled from Leningrad during the siege of Leningrad, which actually was probably a blessing. So, but yeah, someone who obviously suffered greatly for her art, and who I'm fairly ignorant of. So I'm going to be researching, but it sounds like she's the poet of St. Petersburg in a way, in terms of how important she is for kind of recording and making sure that it's not a country of amnesia, as Gore Vidal pointed out. So she's insisting that we remember these dark moments in Soviet history.
And
so
we're reading...
We can get into that. We're going to read Requiem. Yeah.
All right, so those of you listening at home, do your homework, read
Exactly.
Requiem, and then you'll be prepared for our discussion.
And thanks for the feedback on the Kino show. Anna, thanks for requesting to watch the film. And Maria, we always appreciate your feedback, and everyone who contributed to the show as well.
And start sharing requests, like if there's a text you'd like us to engage with, please let us know, and we'll add it to the queue.
Yes. And let's hope the world continues for another week.
Okay, and before we sign
If
off...
it does, we'll be back.
Oh, good point. Yes, and if we do somehow avoid nuclear Armageddon, then next priority is legalize it.
Yes. When you gotta have something. You gotta be on something when you're watching the shit. When you're watching the bombs drop, just to appreciate all the pretty colors.
And on that grim thought, we sign off.
Okay. Bye, everybody.
Texting.